I never thought the person who would destroy me would be someone I'd known since I was 7 years old. The fluorescent lights in the gynecologist's office buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I sat in that sterile waiting room, my body still screaming from the emergency procedure I'd undergone 3 days earlier. The stitches pulled with every breath. My stepbrother Ethan stood in the doorway, his face twisted into something I didn't recognize anymore, and the words that came out of his mouth made my blood turn to ice. "Choose how you're going to pay for this or get the hell out." His voice echoed through the small office. The receptionist behind the counter froze, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. An elderly woman in the corner clutched her purse tighter. I felt every pair of eyes in that room land on me like weights. "Ethan, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Can we talk about this outside?" I tried to stand, but the pain in my abdomen flared white-hot, forcing me back into the plastic chair. My hands trembled as I pressed them against my stomach, feeling the tender flesh beneath my shirt where they'd operated, where they'd saved my life. He took 3 steps toward me, his shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. The smell of antiseptic burned my nostrils. My heart hammered so hard, I thought it might burst through my ribs. "Outside? You want to talk outside?" His laugh was cruel, foreign. "You've had 3 days to figure this out, Olivia. 3 days while I've been calling you, texting you, trying to understand what the hell happened. And now you want to talk." "I was recovering," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "The doctor said I needed to rest. I don't care what the doctor said." His face flushed red, veins bulging in his neck. "You think you can just ignore this? Ignore me? After everything?" The receptionist picked up her phone. I saw her fingers moving, dialing. Good, I thought. Call someone. Call security. Call anyone. But Ethan saw it too. He turned to her with a smile that made my stomach drop. "It's fine," he said smoothly, his voice suddenly calm, controlled. "Just a family matter. My sister here is going through a tough time. She's been difficult lately." Sister. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. We'd never been siblings, not really. Our parents had married when I was 7 and he was 9, merging 2 broken families into one supposedly functional unit. For years it had worked. Ethan had been protective, almost brotherly. He'd scared off my first boyfriend when I was 15. He'd taught me how to drive. He'd been the person I called when I got my acceptance letter to nursing school. I never saw this coming. "I said no," I managed to say, forcing myself to look at him. "I told you no, Ethan. Multiple times." His jaw clenched. The mask of civility slipped. In 2 strides, he closed the distance between us and his hand came up so fast I didn't have time to flinch. The slap rang out like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, stars exploding across my vision. The force of it knocked me out of the chair. I hit the floor hard, my hip slamming against the cold tile. Pain exploded through my ribs, radiating outward in waves that made me gasp. The stitches in my abdomen screamed in protest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except lie there with my cheek pressed against the floor, tasting copper in my mouth. "You think you're too good for it?" His voice came from somewhere above me, dripping with contempt. "Is that it? Little Olivia, the nursing student, too pure to help out her own family?" I tried to push myself up, but my arms wouldn't cooperate. The room tilted and spun. Someone screamed. The receptionist, maybe, or the old woman. I heard chairs scraping, footsteps running. "Sir, I'm calling the police." The receptionist's voice was shrill with panic. "Get away from her right now." "This is none of your business," Ethan snarled. But I heard uncertainty creep into his voice. Reality was setting in. He'd just assaulted me in front of witnesses, in a medical office with cameras. What had he become? When had this transformation happened? My vision cleared slowly. I saw shoes approaching. Navy blue sneakers with white laces. The elderly woman knelt beside me, her weathered hand touching my shoulder with surprising gentleness. "Don't move, sweetheart," she said softly. "Help is coming. Just stay still." "I'm fine," I lied, tasting blood. My tongue had caught between my teeth when I fell. You need to stay down until the paramedics check you out," Her voice was firm but kind. She looked up at Ethan with steel in her eyes. And you need to back away from her. Now. I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder. Ethan must have heard them too because he took a step back, his face cycling through emotions so quickly I couldn't track them all. Anger, fear, regret, defiance. This isn't over, he said, his voice low, meant only for me. You owe me, Olivia. After everything I've done for you, you owe me. Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft whoosh of air. The elderly woman helped me sit up slowly, carefully, supporting my weight. My cheek throbbed where he'd hit me. I could already feel it swelling, the skin tight and hot. The pain in my ribs was worse than the pain from my recent surgery, sharp and unforgiving with every breath. What's your name, dear? The woman asked. Olivia, I whispered. Olivia Pierce. I'm Dorothy. You're going to be okay, Olivia. The police are coming, and they're going to help you. But I wasn't sure anyone could help me. Because Dorothy didn't know what I knew. She didn't understand what had brought us to this moment, to this breaking point. She didn't know about the money, or the debt, or the terrible choice Ethan had tried to force on me. She didn't know that 3 days ago, I'd been bleeding out in an emergency room, and the only person I'd been able to call was him. 6 months earlier, life had been almost normal. I was in my 3rd year of nursing school at County Medical College, living in a tiny studio apartment on the outskirts of downtown. It wasn't much, just a Murphy bed that folded out from the wall, a kitchenette with a hot plate, and a mini fridge and a bathroom so small you practically sat on the toilet while you showered, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had space that belonged only to me. No step-family drama, no tiptoeing around my mother's moods or my stepfather's silent disapproval. My days followed a predictable rhythm. Wake at 5:30. Study for an hour before my shift at the hospital where I worked as a nursing assistant. Classes from 2 to 6. More studying until my brain felt like mush. Sleep. Rinse. Repeat. It was exhausting, but it was exactly what I wanted. Every patient I helped, every skill I learned, every exam I passed brought me one step closer to my goal. Becoming a registered nurse, maybe even a nurse practitioner eventually. I wanted to work in women's health, to help women who'd been ignored or dismissed by the medical system. Women like my mother had been. My mother died when I was 19, 2 years into nursing school. Ovarian cancer that had been misdiagnosed as stress for months. By the time they found it, the disease had spread like wildfire through her body. She lasted 6 weeks after the diagnosis. I'd held her hand in the hospital, watched her waste away, listened to her apologize over and over for not being stronger, for leaving me. As if dying was something she'd chosen. As if cancer was a failure of willpower. Take care of your stepfather, she'd whispered in those final days. He's not perfect, but he loves you. And Ethan ... Ethan is like your real brother now. Look out for each other. I'd promised her I would, even though Michael, my stepfather, had never been particularly warm to me. He'd provided for me, sure, kept a roof over my head, paid for the basics. But there was always a distance between us, a wall I couldn't breach no matter how hard I tried. After Mom died, that wall became a chasm. Michael threw himself into his work as a long-haul truck driver, barely home 2 days a month. When he was around, he was silent and distant, eating dinner in front of the television, sleeping in the master bedroom with the door locked. He didn't ask about school. Didn't ask about anything. Ethan, though. Ethan called every few weeks. He'd moved to the city 3 years earlier, working as a manager at some tech startup. We'd meet for coffee occasionally, him in his expensive suits, me in my scrubs with coffee stains I couldn't quite wash out. He'd ask about school, about my shifts at the hospital, about whether I was dating anyone. You're too focused on work, he'd tell me, stirring sugar into his latte. You need to have some fun, Liv. You're 21. Go to parties, meet people. Live a little. I am living, I'd reply. I'm building a future. He'd smile at that, but there was always something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe, or concern. I thought it was because he cared about me, because he wanted to see me happy. I was so stupid. The truth was, I loved my life, even with its hardships.
I loved the challenge of nursing school, the way it pushed me to be smarter, faster, more competent.
I loved my patients, the elderly woman who told me stories about her youth while I changed her bandages, the young mother who squeezed my hand during contractions, the veteran who called me kiddo and thanked me for my patience. I loved feeling useful, feeling needed.
Feeling like I was making a difference, even in small ways. Money was always tight, but I managed.
Between my job at the hospital and the small amount of financial aid I received,
I could cover my expenses. Barely. I ate a lot of ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. My clothes came from thrift stores.
I didn't have a car, so I took the bus everywhere, often standing in the rain waiting for transfers. But I was making it work.
I was proud of myself for making it work. Then, about 8 months ago, everything started to shift.
It began with small things. Ethan started calling more frequently. Twice a week became every other day, then daily. The calls would come at odd hours, 7 in the morning, 11 at night. Sometimes he just wanted to chat. Sometimes he sounded stressed, asking vague questions about my finances, my schedule, whether I needed help with anything. "I'm fine," I'd tell him. "Really, Ethan, you don't need to worry about me. I'm your big brother," he'd say. "Worrying about you is part of the job description." Then came the visits. He'd show up at my apartment without warning, always with some excuse. He was in the neighborhood. He wanted to take me to dinner. He needed to talk about Dad. Each visit felt slightly off, though I couldn't pinpoint why. He'd look around my tiny apartment with an expression I couldn't read. He'd ask pointed questions about my budget, my debt, my plans after graduation. "You know," he said one evening, sitting on my Murphy bed because I didn't have a couch, "you could make things a lot easier on yourself if you were willing to be flexible." "Flexible about what?" "Your boundaries. Your plans. Sometimes opportunities come up, and if you're too rigid, you miss them." I laughed it off at the time, assuming he was talking about career advice. Maybe he knew someone who was hiring. Maybe he thought I should switch specialties. I didn't understand. Not then. The turning point came 5 months ago. Ethan called me at midnight, his voice tight with panic. "Liv, I need your help." "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but shit. I'm in trouble. Bad trouble." My heart lurched. "What kind of trouble?" "The company I work for is under investigation. Financial fraud."
I didn't know about it. I swear to God, but I'm implicated because I approved some of the transactions.
They're saying I might face criminal charges.
Oh my God, Ethan. I need a lawyer. A good lawyer.
But they're expensive, Liv. Really expensive. And with all my assets frozen during the investigation, I can't access my savings. How much do you need? He was quiet for a moment. Too long. 20,000. The number hit me like a physical blow.
20. Ethan. I don't have that kind of money. I'm a student. I work part-time. I know
you don't have it now, but there are ways to get it. Ways that wouldn't cost you anything in the long run. What are you talking about?
I have a friend who runs a private lending service.
He'd be willing to give you a loan, no questions asked. The interest is high, but it's temporary. Once the investigation is over and I can access my accounts again, I'll pay it all back. You'd just be helping me out for a few months? Every instinct in my body screamed danger. Taking out a loan for someone else, even family, was a terrible idea. I'd learned about predatory lending in one of my public health classes. I knew how quickly debt could spiral out of control. "I don't know, Ethan. That sounds risky. Please." His voice cracked. "You're the only family I have left who I can ask. Dad's unreachable half the time, and he doesn't have any money anyway.
You're it, Liv. If I go to prison, I can't go to prison."
I wouldn't survive it. The desperation in his voice broke something in me.
This was Ethan, the person who taught me to ride a bike,
who'd stayed up with me the night before my SATs, who'd held me while I sobbed at Mom's funeral. He was family, and family helped each other.
"Okay," I said softly. "Okay, I'll do it.
But you have to promise me you'll pay it back as soon as you can."
"I promise." "God, Liv, thank you. Thank you so much."
"I'll send you the information for the lender tomorrow." "You're saving my life."
I should have known better.
I should have asked more questions. demanded proof of the investigation, insisted on talking to a lawyer myself.
But I was 21 and naive, and I believed that the people you loved wouldn't lie to you about something so important. The next day, I received an email from someone named Julian Reeves, owner of Reeves Financial Solutions.
The loan terms were outlined in a PDF attachment. $20,000 at an interest rate of 30%, to be paid back within 6 months. If I defaulted, the debt would increase by an additional 20% every month, 30% interest. I knew it was predatory. I knew it was insane. But Ethan called me 3 times that day, each time sounding more panicked, more desperate. And I caved. I signed the documents electronically. The money appeared in my account the next day. I transferred it to Ethan immediately. "You're a lifesaver," he said when he called to confirm receipt. "I won't forget this, Liv. I promise." For the first month, everything seemed fine. Ethan would check in regularly, always upbeat, always reassuring me that the investigation was moving forward and he'd be cleared soon. The monthly interest payment was steep $500, but I could manage it by cutting back on groceries and picking up extra shifts. The second month, things got harder. I had to choose between the interest payment and buying my textbooks for the semester. I chose the payment. The third month, Ethan stopped answering his phone. I called him dozens of times. Texted him constantly. Nothing. He'd vanished. When I finally tracked down his work number, a receptionist told me he no longer worked there. She couldn't tell me anything else. Panic set in. I reached out to Julian Reeves, explaining the situation, begging for an extension or a reduction in the interest rate. He responded with a single line. "Your agreement with Mr. Pierce is between you and him. Your agreement with me is separate. Payment is due on the 1st of each month." I fell behind. 1 month, then 2. The debt ballooned from $20,000 to $24,000 to $28,000. Julian started calling me directly. His voice always calm, but with an edge that made my skin crawl. "Miss Pierce, we need to discuss your account. I'm trying to get the money. I'm working as much as I can. Working isn't enough. You need to be creative.
There are other ways to settle debts." "What other ways?"
"We can discuss that when you're ready to be reasonable." The calls became more frequent, more aggressive.
He started showing up at my apartment, always impeccably dressed, always smiling that cold, empty smile.
"Olivia," he'd say, standing in my doorway uninvited. "We really need to resolve this situation." I'd close the door in his face, my hands shaking, and he'd stand there for a few minutes before leaving. The next day, he'd be back. 4 months after I'd taken out the loan, I was $32,000 in debt and drowning. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on school. My grades started slipping. I called out sick from work more often than I showed up because I couldn't stop crying. Couldn't stop the panic attacks that left me gasping on the floor of my bathroom. And Ethan was still gone. Still unreachable. Like he'd never existed at all. I should have gone to the police. Should have told someone what was happening. But I was ashamed. I'd been stupid and naive, and now I was paying the price. How could I explain this to anyone? How could I admit that I'd taken out a predatory loan for someone who disappeared? Then, 3 weeks ago, Ethan resurfaced. He called me out of the blue. His voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, Liv.
Sorry I've been things got crazy with the case, but it's all resolved now."
I'm in the clear. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. All the fear and anger and desperation of the past 4 months crashed over me at once. "Liv? You there? Where have you been?" I managed to choke out. "Where the hell have you been, Ethan?" "I told you. Things got complicated. I'm $32,000 in debt. Julian Reeves is stalking me. I'm failing school because I can't concentrate, and you've been ignoring me for 4 months." Silence on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. "I didn't realize it had gotten that bad." "You didn't realize. You promised you'd pay me back in a few months. You promised, Ethan." "I know what I promised. But things changed. The settlement I got from the company was a lot less than I expected. I don't have $20,000 lying around anymore. Then get a loan. Sell something. I don't care how you do it, but you need to help me fix this. I can't." 2 words, flat and final.
I'm sorry, Liv, but I can't. I have my own problems to deal with. You're going to have to figure this out on your own. Figure it out on my own.
Ethan, I only took out this loan to help you. And I appreciate that. I really do. But you're an adult. You signed the contract. This is your responsibility now. He hung up. I stood in my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. Something inside me broke.
Not shattered. That would have been too dramatic. Just ... cracked. A slow, quiet fracture that spread through my chest and into my bones.
He'd used me.
My stepbrother, the person I trusted more than anyone, had used me and then abandoned me to deal with the consequences. But even then, even with that betrayal fresh and raw, I never imagined what would come next. The pain started 3 days after that phone call with Ethan. At first, I thought it was just stress.
My lower abdomen ached dully, and I felt bloated and uncomfortable.
ID had irregular periods for years, nothing unusual for someone under as much stress as I was. So when I started bleeding,
I assumed it was just my cycle being strange again.
But the pain grew worse. By the second day, it was sharp and persistent, stabbing into my right side with every movement. I took ibuprofen and tried to push through. I had a shift at the hospital that I couldn't afford to miss.
Julian had called me again that morning, his voice silky and threatening.
Miss Pierce, we need to meet. Today. There's a proposition I'd like to discuss with you.
I think you'll find it very interesting. I can't meet today. I'm working. Make time.
I'll be at the coffee shop across from your apartment at 7 tonight.
Don't be late. He'd hung up before I could respond.
By the time my shift ended at 6, I could barely walk. The pain had spread from my side to my entire abdomen, radiating outward in waves that made me double over.
My supervisor found me in the supply closet, clutching my stomach and trying not to vomit. Olivia, you need to go to the ER, she said firmly.
Right now, I'll drive you. I can't afford the ER, I whispered. I don't have insurance that covers emergency visits. You're a nursing student.
You should know better than to ignore symptoms like this. Come on. She practically dragged me to her car and drove me to the emergency department.
By the time we arrived, I was crying from the pain, unable to stand upright. They took me back immediately. The diagnosis came quickly. A ruptured ovarian cyst. A large one. I was bleeding internally, and I needed emergency surgery to stop the hemorrhaging. Do you have someone we can call? The nurse asked as they wheeled me toward the OR. Family? A partner?
I gave them Ethan's number.
He was the only family I had that was reachable.
Michael was somewhere in Montana on a delivery route, and I didn't have a way to contact him. They called Ethan 3 times while I was in surgery. He never picked up. When I woke up in the recovery room hours later, groggy and disoriented from anesthesia, a different nurse was sitting beside me. She smiled gently when she saw my eyes open.
Hey there. You're okay.
The surgery went well.
Dr. Patterson was able to stop the bleeding and repair the damage.
You're going to need to take it easy for a few weeks, but you should make a full recovery.
How much is this going to cost? The words came out slurred, my tongue thick and clumsy. The nurse's smile faltered.
Let's not worry about that right now.
You just focus on healing.
But I knew. Emergency surgery, an overnight stay in the hospital, anesthesia, medications. It would be thousands of dollars. Possibly tens of thousands. Money I absolutely did not have.
I stayed in the hospital for 2 days. They wanted to keep me longer, but I insisted on being discharged because every additional day added to a bill I couldn't pay. When the financial counselor came to discuss payment options, I nearly had a panic attack right there in the hospital bed. The total cost of your emergency care is approximately $41,000, she said, looking at her tablet. With your insurance coverage, you'll be responsible for about $15,000 out of pocket. $15,000? On top of the $32,000 I already owed Julian. $47,000 in debt total. I was 21 years old, making $11 an hour, and I owed $47,000. The counselor saw the panic on my face.
We can set up a payment plan. Small monthly payments over several years. I can't even make my current payments, I said. My voice sounded hollow, distant. I'm already drowning. She gave me pamphlets about financial assistance programs and charity care. I took them numbly, knowing they wouldn't be enough. Nothing would be enough. When they finally discharged me, I called Ethan again. This time he answered on the third ring. "Hey Liv, I heard you tried to reach me, what's up?" "What's up?" As if I'd called to chat about the weather. "I was in the hospital," I said flatly. "Emergency surgery." "They called you multiple times." "Oh. Shit. Are you okay?" "I'm alive." That's about all I can say right now.
What happened?
I explained briefly about the cyst and the surgery. He made sympathetic noises but didn't offer to help. Didn't ask what he could do. Just listened with what felt like detached curiosity. "That's rough," he said when I finished. "Medical bills are the worst. Ethan, I need your help. I'm almost $50,000 in debt now. I can't do this anymore.
I need you to pay back what I loaned you.
Or at least help me figure out how to deal with Julian."
I told you I don't have the money.
"Then get it. Sell your car. Take out a loan yourself. I don't care. You did this to me." His voice cooled several degrees. "I didn't do anything to you, Olivia. You made the choice to help me. That was your decision. Because you manipulated me. You lied about the investigation. I didn't lie. There was an investigation. It got resolved. That's not my fault. You said you'd pay me back. And I will, eventually, when I can. But right now, I can't. So you need to figure something out." "Figure what out?" "How am I supposed to come up with $50,000? I'm a student.
I don't have any assets, I don't have savings, I don't have anything."
He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Become softer, almost gentle. "Actually, there might be a way. Julian mentioned it to me a while back." "Mentioned what?" "A way for you to settle your debt with him. It wouldn't require any money up front." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. "What are you talking about?" "Julian has clients, wealthy clients who are willing to pay for certain services. If you were willing to provide those services, he'd forgive your debt completely." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Services? You mean just companionship mostly, going to dinners, events, being charming and pretty. Sometimes more, if you're comfortable with it. But it's your choice." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what he was saying. "You retelling me to prostitute myself to pay off a debt I only have because I helped you?" "I'm telling you it's an option. One that Julian is offering. He's actually being pretty generous, considering you've defaulted on the loan. I wouldn't have defaulted if you'd paid me back like you promised." "Look, Liv, I understand you're upset, but you need to be realistic here.
You're in a bad situation. This is a way out. A clean way out.
You do a few jobs, make some powerful connections, and your debt disappears. Hell, you might even enjoy it. These guys have money to spend on someone pretty." "You're insane," I whispered. "You've lost your mind. I'm trying to help you." "Help me? You destroyed my life and now you're trying to pimp me out to fix it. Don't be dramatic. It's business." "That's all this is." I hung up, threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. I hoped it was broken. I hoped I'd never have to hear his voice again.
But I knew it wasn't over. Julian would come calling. He'd offer the same deal Ethan had mentioned, and I'd have to refuse. And then what?
What would he do to me when I couldn't pay?
For 3 days after my discharge, I hid in my apartment, recovering from surgery and trying to figure out what to do.
The pain medication they'd given me helped with the physical ache but did nothing for the mental anguish. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely think. My phone rang constantly. Julian, over and over again. I didn't answer. On the third day, I had a follow-up appointment at the gynecologist's office.
Just a routine check to make sure the surgical site was healing properly.
I almost canceled, but I knew I shouldn't ignore medical care, no matter how terrible everything else was. I took the bus, moving slowly, carefully. The stitches pulled with every step. My abdomen was still swollen and tender. I wore loose sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. The gynecologist's office was in a medical building downtown, a small suite on the third floor.
I checked in at the reception desk and sat down in the waiting room, trying not to think about the bills that would keep coming, the debt that would keep growing.
That's when Ethan walked in. I stared at him, unable to process his presence.
He wasn't supposed to be here. How did he even know I'd be here?
"Liv," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk. How did you know I was here?" "I called the hospital."
"They told me about your follow-up appointment." He sat down in the chair next to mine, ignoring the receptionist's curious look. "Julian called me this morning."
"He's pissed, Liv. Really pissed."
"You've been ignoring him." "I don't want to talk to him."
"You don't have a choice. He's coming here. He wants to discuss the arrangement in person."
"I'm not doing it. I'm not prostituting myself." "Then you need to pay him. Today. Right now. I don't have the money."
"Then figure something out." His voice rose, drawing attention from the other people in the waiting room. He lowered it again, leaning closer.
"You're being stubborn and stupid."
"Julian is offering you a way out. A real way out. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people in your situation end up destroyed. Bankruptcy, ruined credit, constant harassment. He's being generous." "Generous," I repeated flatly.
"He's offering to let strange men use my body in exchange for debt forgiveness. That's not generosity."
"That's coercion. Call it whatever you want. It's still your best option. It's not an option at all." His jaw clenched. His eyes went cold.
"Then what are you going to do?"
You can't pay him. You can't pay the hospital. You're going to lose everything: your apartment, your education, your future. All because you're too proud to accept help."
"That's not help." "Yes, it is. It's the only help you're going to get."
The door to the office opened and Julian Reeves walked in.
He looked exactly as I remembered, mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a gray suit, dark hair slicked back, a smile that never reached his eyes.
He surveyed the waiting room like a predator assessing prey. When his gaze landed on me, his smile widened. "Miss Pierce," he said warmly, crossing the room. "So good to see you. I was hoping we could have a little chat." "I don't want to talk to you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think you do. I think you want to hear what I have to offer." He glanced at Ethan. "Thank you for arranging this meeting. Very helpful." Ethan had arranged this. Had told Julian where I'd be. Had orchestrated this confrontation in a public place where I couldn't easily escape.
The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment I couldn't feel anything at all.
Just numbness.
"I'm here for a medical appointment," I said, forcing myself to meet Julian's eyes. "That's all." "Of course. I respect that. But afterwards, we need to talk."
"You and I have business to settle, and you've been avoiding me." "That's not very professional." "I'm not a professional. I'm a student who made a mistake. A very expensive mistake." His smile never wavered.
"But mistakes can be corrected."
"I have several clients who would be very interested in meeting you. Successful men, powerful men. A few hours of your time could erase months of debt."
"I'm not interested." "You should be. Because if you continue to default on your payments, I'll have no choice but to pursue other collection methods.
Legal action, wage garnishment, asset seizure. It's messy and unpleasant for everyone involved."
"I don't have any assets to seize."
"Then we'll garnish your wages.
Every paycheck you earn will go toward your debt."
"You'll be working for me for years, Olivia, decades maybe."
Or, he spread his hands, "you could spend a few evenings being charming and pretty, and walk away clean, free. No debt, no harassment, no consequences.
Just a fresh start." I wanted to scream at him.
Wanted to tell him exactly what I thought of his offer and his manipulation and his predatory business practices. But I was in a medical office, surrounded by innocent people, and making a scene would only make things worse.
"I said no," I repeated, my voice shaking.
"I will never say yes to what you're offering. Never." That's when Ethan stood up, his face flushed with anger.
His voice rose, echoing through the small waiting room. "Choose how you're going to pay for this, or get the hell out." And everything that I described at the beginning happened. The slap. The fall. The pain in my ribs that made me see stars. The taste of blood in my mouth.
Dorothy's kind hands helping me sit up. Julian backing away slowly, his face unreadable.
Ethan standing there, breathing hard, his hand still raised like he might hit me again. And the sirens. Getting louder and louder.
The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers, 1 male and 1 female, both looking professional and alert as they pushed through the door of the gynecologist's office. The female officer went directly to me while her partner assessed the situation, his hand resting on his belt near his radio.
"Ma'am, I'm Officer Rodriguez. Can you tell me what happened here?"
She knelt beside me, her dark eyes scanning my face, lingering on the swelling cheek and split lip.
I opened my mouth but couldn't make words come out.
Everything felt surreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else.
Dorothy, still beside me, spoke up instead.
"That man attacked her,"
she said firmly, pointing at Ethan. He slapped her so hard she fell out of her chair and hit the floor. I saw the whole thing. And that other man, she gestured to Julian, who was standing near the door looking calm. The male officer, whose name tag read Chen, approached Ethan. "Sir, I need you to put your hands where I can see them and step away from the victim." "Victim?" Ethan laughed, but it sounded hollow. "This is a family matter. My sister and I were having a disagreement." "A disagreement where you struck her hard enough to knock her to the ground?" Officer Chen's voice was flat, unimpressed. "That's assault, sir, not a disagreement. She's being dramatic. I barely touched her." "Sir, put your hands up. Now." Ethan's face went through a series of rapid changes. Defiance, fear, calculation, and finally resignation. He raised his hands slowly. Officer Chen guided him to face the wall, beginning to pat him down for weapons. Officer Rodriguez turned her attention back to me. "What's your name, honey?" "Olivia Pierce," I managed to whisper.
"He's my stepbrother."
"Can you tell me what led to this altercation?" I looked at Julian, who was watching everything with an expression of mild concern, like he was observing an interesting play rather than participating in a crime. He caught my eye and gave me the slightest shake of his head. A warning. But I was done being afraid. "He's been trying to force me to prostitute myself to pay off a debt," I said clearly. The words felt like knives coming out of my throat, sharp and painful, but liberating too.
"He took out a loan in my name. No, I took it out for him, and then he disappeared and stopped paying."
"Now the lender," I pointed at Julian, "is trying to make me sleep with his clients to settle the debt." The waiting room went completely silent. Even the receptionist had stopped typing. Dorothy's hand tightened on my shoulder, supportive and warm. Officer Rodriguez's expression hardened. She stood and approached Julian. "Sir, is this true?" Julian's smile never faltered. "Officer, I run a legitimate lending business. Miss Pierce took out a loan of her own volition and signed a legal contract. If she's chosen to characterize standard debt collection as something inappropriate, that's unfortunate. But it doesn't change the facts. I've never forced anyone to do anything. So you didn't just offer to forgive her debt in exchange for sexual services?" I offered her an introduction to some business contacts who might be interested in hiring her for legitimate consulting work. If she misunderstood the nature of that offer, that's not my responsibility. It was such a smooth lie, delivered with such confidence, that for a moment I doubted my own memory. Had he actually said what I thought he said? Had I misunderstood?
"No, I hadn't. I knew what he'd meant, what he'd been offering."
Officer Chun had finished securing Ethan in handcuffs. "Olivia, do you want to press charges for assault?" Did I? Part of me wanted to say no. To let this all go away. To pretend none of it had happened. Ethan was family, even if he'd betrayed me. Pressing charges felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But I thought about the slap. The way he'd sneered at me. The cruelty in his voice. "You think you're too good for it?" And I thought about my mother's final words. Look out for each other. Ethan hadn't looked out for me.
He'd sacrificed me to save himself, and then tried to sell me to save himself again.
Whatever bond we'd once had, he'd destroyed it completely. "Yes," I said quietly. "I want to press charges." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "We're going to need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. Are you okay to do that now, Or do you need medical attention first? I just had surgery a few days ago, I said.
I was here for a follow-up appointment, but I can go to the station.
I want to.
I need to tell someone everything that's happened. We'll have you checked out by paramedics first, just to be safe.
The assault might have aggravated your surgical wounds. She pulled out her radio.
Dispatch, this is Rodriguez. We need an ambulance at 433 Medical Plaza, 3rd floor. Non-emergency, but we have an assault victim who recently had surgery and may need evaluation. While we waited for the paramedics,
Officer Chen read Ethan his rights.
I watched Ethan's face cycle through emotions again, anger giving way to fear, giving way to something that might have been regret.
But when his eyes met mine, the regret vanished, replaced by cold resentment. You're going to regret this, Liv, he said quietly. You have no idea what you've just done. Sir, I'd advise you to stop talking, Officer Chen said firmly. Julian, meanwhile, had produced a business card and was trying to hand it to Officer Rodriguez.
If you need to contact me for any follow-up, here's my information. I'm happy to cooperate fully with any investigation.
I have all of Miss Pierce's loan documents on file, properly signed and notarized. Everything was completely legal. We'll be in touch, Officer Rodriguez said, taking the card without looking at it.
The paramedics arrived shortly after, 2 young EMTs who were gentle and professional. They examined my face, checked my ribs, and carefully lifted my shirt to look at the surgical site.
One of them, a woman with kind eyes and dozens of braids pulled back in a ponytail, winced when she saw the bruising. You took a hard fall, she said. Your stitches are intact, but you've got significant bruising around the incision site. You should follow up with your surgeon as soon as possible to make sure there's just no internal damage. I was supposed to see my doctor today, I said. That's why I was here. Let's get you checked out now then. Can you walk? I nodded, though every movement hurt.
Dorothy helped me stand, her arm around my waist, supporting me. As I walked past Ethan, he tried one more time. Liv, please don't do this.
We're family. I stopped and looked at him, really looked at him.
At this person I'd once trusted completely.
This person who'd taught me to drive, who'd made me laugh when I was sad, who'd promised to always have my back.
No,
I said softly. We're not. Not anymore. Officer Chen escorted Ethan out of the office, and I followed with Officer Rodriguez, the paramedics and Dorothy, who insisted on coming with me. As we left, I saw Julian still standing in the waiting room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking quietly to someone. He looked up as I passed and smiled that empty smile. See you soon, Miss Pierce, he said. A chill ran down my spine. But Officer Rodriguez heard it too, and I saw her make a note on her pad. Good. Let her note everything.
Let there be a record of all of this.
The next few hours were a blur of police stations, statements, and medical examinations. My gynecologist, Dr. Patterson, was called to the station to evaluate my injuries. She was furious when she saw the bruising. Who did this to you? She demanded. You're 3 days post-op. This kind of trauma could have caused serious complications. My stepbrother, I said numbly. He hit me in your waiting room. I heard. The receptionist called me right after it happened. Olivia, why didn't you tell me you were in trouble? When you came in for the surgery, when we talked about payment options, you should have said something.
I was ashamed,
I whispered. I made such stupid decisions. I let someone manipulate me into taking out a predatory loan, and then I couldn't pay it back.
And everything just spiraled. Dr. Patterson sat down beside me in the examination room, her expression softening.
Predatory lenders target vulnerable people. That's what makes them predatory.
You're not stupid for falling for it. You were targeted because you were in a difficult situation and you wanted to help someone you loved. That's not a character flaw. That's human nature. Tears welled up in my eyes.
I'd been holding them back for hours through the police questioning, through giving my statement, through all of it, but Dr. Patterson's kindness broke through my defenses.
I'm so deep in debt,
I sobbed. Almost $50,000. I'm never going to get out from under it. I'm going to have to drop out of school, and I'll spend the rest of my life paying off money. I borrowed to help someone who didn't even care about me.
Not necessarily. Dr. Patterson pulled a tissue from the box on the counter and handed it to me.
If you were coerced into taking out that loan under false pretenses, there may be legal remedies.
And if this Julian Reeves was offering to forgive your debt in exchange for illegal services,
that's definitely something the police and prosecutors will be interested in.
But he was so careful about how he worded everything.
He made it sound like legitimate business opportunities. They always do.
But the police deal with people like him all the time. Trust the process. After Dr. Patterson cleared me medically bruised but not seriously injured, I
was taken to an interview room where a detective was waiting. Detective Lisa Morrison was in her 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Olivia, thank you for being willing to talk to me," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. "I know this has been a traumatic day.
I'm going to ask you some questions about your relationship with Ethan Pierce and Julian Reeves.
Take your time, and if you need breaks, just let me know." For the next 2 hours, I told her everything. The initial phone call from Ethan about needing money for legal fees. The loan from Julian. Ethan's disappearance. The mounting debt. The surgery. The offer to settle the debt through companionship services. All of it. Detective Morrison took notes constantly, occasionally asking clarifying questions.
When I finished, she sat back and studied me.
"Olivia, I need to tell you something. This isn't the first complaint we've received about Julian Reeves." My head snapped up. "It's not?" "No, we've had 3 other women come forward in the past year with similar stories. Each of them took out loans from Reeves Financial Solutions under various circumstances. Each of them ended up in severe debt.
And each of them was offered the same deal: provide companionship services to wealthy clients in exchange for debt forgiveness. Why isn't he in jail?"
"Because proving these cases is difficult. The loan contracts are technically legal, predatory, and exploitative, but legal. And Reeves is very careful about how he makes his offers. He never explicitly says, 'have sex with these men.' He uses euphemisms, talks about consulting work, and business opportunities.
Without recorded conversations or other hard evidence, it's difficult to prove coercion or sex trafficking charges. So he just gets away with it?" Detective Morrison's eyes hardened.
"But I need your help. Would you be willing to wear a wire and meet with Reeves again? Get him to explicitly state what he's offering."
The thought made my stomach turn.
Meet with him again? I know it's asking a lot. But with your testimony, combined with the other victims' testimonies, and recorded evidence of him offering illegal services in exchange for debt forgiveness, we could build a strong case. We could shut him down permanently. I thought about the other women. The 3 who'd come before me. How many others were there who hadn't reported him? How many more would there be if he wasn't stopped? "I'll do it," I said.
"Whatever you need me to do." Detective Morrison smiled for the first time since we'd started talking.
"You're brave, Olivia. Braver than you probably realize." But I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. We spent another hour planning the operation. I would call Julian and agree to meet with him to discuss settling my account. I'd wear a recording device. Detectives would be nearby, ready to move in if anything went wrong.
It would happen in 2 days, giving them time to prepare and giving me time to recover from the day's trauma.
When I finally left the police station, it was almost 8 at night. Dorothy had waited the entire time, sitting in the lobby with a paperback novel and a cup of terrible coffee from the vending machine.
When she saw me, she stood up immediately.
"How are you holding up, dear?" "I'm okay," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. "Thank you for staying."
"You didn't have to." "Of course I did. You think I was going to let you face all this alone?"
She linked her arm through mine as we walked toward the exit. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Someone who can look after you?" I thought about my tiny apartment, where Julian knew the address, where he'd shown up countless times, where I'd be alone with my thoughts and my fear. "I'll be fine," I lied. Dorothy saw right through it. "You're coming home with me. I won't hear any arguments. I have a guest room, and my daughter left some clothes there that should fit you. You need a good meal, a safe place to sleep, and someone to keep an eye on those injuries." I should have declined.
Should have insisted I could take care of myself. But the truth was, I desperately didn't want to be alone. Okay, I whispered.
Thank you. Dorothy's house was a small, neat bungalow in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. She made me chamomile tea and heated up leftover lasagna while I sat at her kitchen table, feeling like I'd somehow stepped into an alternate reality. Just this morning, I'd been alone and terrified. Now I was sitting in a stranger's kitchen, being cared for by someone who had no obligation to help me. Why are you being so kind to me? I asked as she set a plate of lasagna in front of me. You don't even know me. Dorothy sat down across from me with her own plate.
When I was your age, I was in a bad situation too.
Different circumstances, but the same feeling of being trapped and alone. A woman I'd never met before helped me get out. She gave me a place to stay, helped me find a lawyer, supported me until I could get back on my feet. She told me, someday when you're able, you'll help someone else the same way.
So that's what I'm doing, passing it forward. What happened to you?
If you don't mind me asking, abusive husband.
You were expected to just endure it, make it work.
But I had a young daughter to protect, and I knew if I stayed, he'd eventually turn his violence on her too. So I ran.
And that woman, her name was Patricia, she saved our lives. Is your daughter okay now? She's wonderful.
She's a lawyer, actually. Specializes in family law, helping women in situations like I was in. She learned early that the world can be cruel, but it can also be kind if you look for the right people. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. The lasagna was delicious, rich with cheese and herbs.
I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I started eating. I'd barely had anything all day.
The police want me to wear a wire, I said eventually. To meet with Julian again and get him to incriminate himself. Are you going to do it? I said yes. But I'm scared. Of course you're scared. That's a natural response to a dangerous situation.
But being scared doesn't mean you can't do it.
Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear.
What if something goes wrong?
What if he figures out I'm recording him? The police will be there. They won't let anything happen to you. He's threatened me before.
Not directly, but the implication was there.
See you soon, Miss Pierce. Like it's a game to him. Dorothy reached across the table and took my hand.
Then you take his game away from him.
You get him on record, you help the police arrest him, and you make sure he can't hurt anyone else.
That's how you win. I wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe I could be that strong, that brave, but all I felt was exhausted and broken.
That night, lying in Dorothy's guest room in borrowed pajamas, I couldn't sleep. My body ached from the fall and the stress.
My mind raced with everything that had happened, everything that still needed to happen.
I kept replaying the moment Ethan hit me. The shock and betrayal on his face when I said I'd press charges, Julian's calm smile as he watched everything unfold.
And I thought about the loan documents I'd signed.
The contract that had seemed so straightforward at the time, but had turned into a nightmare.
I'd been so naive, so trusting. My phone buzzed on the nightstand.
A text from an unknown number. You made a mistake today, Olivia. You should have taken the deal.
Now things are going to get much more complicated.
My heart hammered. Julian. It had to be Julian.
But how did he get this number?
I'd never given it to him. He'd always called from records he had from the loan application.
Another text came through. Sleep well.
We'll talk soon.
I wanted to throw the phone across the room.
Instead, I took a screenshot of the messages and forwarded them to Detective Morrison.
She'd given me her direct number before I left the station, told me to contact her immediately if Julian tried to reach out. Her response came within minutes. Got it. Don't respond to him. We're documenting everything. You're doing great, Olivia, but I didn't feel great. I felt like a mouse being toyed with by a cat, and I had no idea how much longer I could run.
2 days later, I stood in a coffee shop bathroom, staring at my reflection while a female detective adjusted the wire taped to my chest. My hands shook as I held my shirt up. The bruise on my ribs had darkened to a deep purple yellow.
The surgical site was still tender, the stitches pulling every time I moved.
You're going to do fine, Detective Morrison said, her voice calm and reassuring. We'll be at the table right behind you. If anything feels wrong, if you feel unsafe at all, just say the word confused, and we'll move in immediately. Understood?
Understood, I whispered. Remember, we need him to explicitly state what he's offering. Get him to say the words.
Ask direct questions. Don't let him hide behind euphemisms. I nodded, pulling my shirt back down.
The wire was invisible under my clothes, a thin microphone taped between my breasts, the transmitter clipped to the back of my jeans and covered by my jacket.
Julian had responded to my text almost immediately when I'd reached out the previous day.
I'd written, "I've been thinking about your offer. Can we meet to discuss details?" His reply, "I knew you'd come around.
Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Coffee. Come alone." Now it was 1:55 p.m.
And I was about to walk into a meeting with a predator while pretending I was willing to become prey. Detective Morrison walked me out of the bathroom. 3 other undercover officers were scattered around the coffee shop, one reading a newspaper near the window, one working on a laptop at a corner table, one behind the counter posing as an employee.
They'd rented out the shop for the afternoon, replacing the regular staff with police personnel. Every customer in here except Julian would be law enforcement. I ordered a coffee I didn't want and sat at a table in the center of the room,
positioning myself so the officers had clear sight lines. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer when I set it down.
I clasped my hands together in my lap to hide the trembling. Julian arrived exactly at 2 o'clock. He wore another expensive suit, charcoal gray this time, with a lavender shirt and no tie. His hair was perfect, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked like a successful businessman, not a criminal. "Olivia," he said warmly, sitting across from me.
"I'm so pleased you decided to meet with me.
I was worried after the incident at the medical office that our communication had broken down. It was a difficult day, I said carefully. A lot happened. Indeed. I heard your stepbrother was arrested. Assault charges, correct? Yes. Such a shame.
Family disputes are always the most painful. He flagged down the undercover officer behind the counter and ordered an espresso.
Once it arrived, he turned his attention back to me.
"So, you said you wanted to discuss my offer. Does that mean you're reconsidering?"
Before, you talked about business opportunities and consulting work.
But I want to know specifically what that means.
What would I be expected to do? Julian smiled.
Direct. I appreciate that. Let me be equally direct.
I have a number of clients, successful men, wealthy men who are looking for companionship. They're busy, they travel frequently, and they don't have time for traditional relationships. They're willing to pay very generously for someone to accompany them to dinners, events, business trips. Someone attractive, intelligent, and discreet. Just companionship?
Primarily, yes.
Though of course, what happens between consenting adults in private is their own business.
Some of my clients may be interested in more intimate arrangements.
But that would be entirely your choice.
My stomach turned.
And in exchange for providing this companionship you would forgive my debt?
Completely.
After a certain number of engagements, let's say 10 to start, your debt would be cleared. No more payments, no more interest, no more phone calls. You'd be free. 10 engagements with different men? Most likely different men, yes.
Though some clients do request repeat companions if they're particularly pleased with the service. And what happens during these engagements?
Specifically, Julian leaned back in his chair, studying me.
For a moment I thought he'd realized what I was doing. That he'd figured out I was wearing a wire. My heart hammered so hard I was sure he could hear it. But then he smiled again. "You're smart to ask for details."
The engagements vary.
Sometimes it's simply attending a dinner or gala as arm candy.
Sometimes it's a weekend trip where you'd be expected to share accommodations. Sometimes clients request more personal services, massages for instance, or private entertainment.
By personal services, you mean sex. The word hung in the air between us.
Julian's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. I mean whatever you and the client agree to. If a client is interested in a sexual arrangement and you consent to it, that's a private matter between adults. I simply facilitate the introduction.
And if I don't consent? Then you don't engage in those activities. Though I should mention that clients who request more intimate services tend to pay better, which means fewer engagements would be required to clear your debt. So I could pay off $50,000 by sleeping with 10 men. If you chose to offer those services, yes. Though the number might be fewer if the clients are particularly generous.
One of my clients recently paid $30,000 for a weekend companion who was willing to be ... adventurous. There it was. The explicit admission. He was offering to forgive my debt in exchange for sex work. Not companionship. Not consulting. Sex.
I forced myself to ask the next question, even though every part of me was screaming to run.
And how would this work logistically? Would I meet clients here in the city? Sometimes. Other times you'd travel.
My clients are located all over the country: New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago. I'd provide travel arrangements and ensure your safety. Everything would be handled professionally. By professionally, you mean you'd be running a prostitution ring and I'd be one of your prostitutes.
Julian's expression finally changed.
The smile vanished, replaced by something colder, harder.
I'd be very careful with that terminology, Olivia. What I'm describing is a private arrangement between consenting adults.
There's nothing illegal about it, except the part where you coercing me into it by holding my debt over my head.
Coercing. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm offering you a choice. You can continue making your regular payments and stay in debt for the next decade, or you can take advantage of an opportunity to clear that debt quickly. That's not coercion. That's options. Options that only exist because you manipulated me into taking out a predatory loan in the first place. I didn't manipulate you.
Your stepbrother asked you for help, and you agreed to provide it. That was your choice.
He lied to me about why he needed the money. Julian shrugged. People lie. That's not my concern. My concern is that you signed a contract and you're now in default.
I'm trying to help you resolve that situation in a way that benefits both of us. By pimping me out. By offering you an opportunity. His voice was sharp now, the pleasant facade cracking.
An opportunity that many women would be grateful for. Do you know how much debt $50,000 is for someone in your situation? You'll never pay it off working as a nursing assistant. Never. You'll be garnishing wages until you're 40 years old,
assuming you even manage to finish school with this hanging over you. I'm offering you a way out, a real way out.
And you're sitting here acting like I'm the villain.
You are the villain, I said quietly. You prey on desperate people and then force them into situations they never would have chosen otherwise. Force? I've forced nothing. You're the one who reached out to me.
You're the one who said you wanted to discuss my offer. He was right, and that made it worse. I had reached out.
I had set up this meeting.
Because the police had asked me to, yes, but Julian didn't know that. I needed to hear you say it clearly, I said. I needed to understand exactly what you were proposing before I made a decision. And now you understand. So what's your decision, Olivia? I looked at him, really looked at him. At this man who destroyed my life without a second thought. Who'd done the same thing to at least 3 other women that I knew of, probably dozens more. Who would continue doing it to countless others unless someone stopped him? My decision, I said slowly, is that you're under arrest. Detective Morrison was out of her seat before I finished the sentence.
The other undercover officers moved simultaneously, converging on our table from all directions.
Julian's face went through a rapid series of changes: confusion, realization, fury.
Olivia Pierce, you stupid little. Julian Reeves.
You're under arrest for attempted sex trafficking, coercion, and operating an illegal prostitution ring.
Detective Morrison's voice was hard and professional as she pulled Julian's hands behind his back.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Double quotes. Julian didn't resist, but his eyes stayed locked on mine, burning with rage. You have no idea what you've just done, he hissed. No idea who you're messing with. I have lawyers. I have connections. This won't stick. We'll see about that, Detective Morrison said calmly.
We have 3 other victims willing to testify, recorded evidence of you soliciting prostitution, and documentation of your predatory lending practices.
I think it'll stick just fine.
As they led Julian out of the coffee shop in handcuffs, I felt something inside me shift. Not relief exactly, that would come later, but something like vindication, like justice. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. Detective Morrison came back to the table once Julian was secured in the patrol car outside.
You were perfect, Olivia. Absolutely perfect.
He admitted everything we needed. Is it really over?
I asked, my voice shaking. Can he really not hurt me anymore?
Not if I have anything to say about it. With the evidence we just gathered, combined with what the other victims have provided, we can build a strong case for multiple counts of sex trafficking and coercion. He's looking at serious prison time. But what about my debt? The contract I signed, is that still valid?
We'll need to have a lawyer look at it, but contracts signed under duress or for illegal purposes are typically void.
I think you have a strong case for having the debt dismissed entirely. Especially if Reeves entered into the loan agreement with the intent to coerce you into prostitution from the beginning. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in months. Really? Really, you're going to need to testify when this goes to trial, and that won't be easy. Defense attorneys will try to discredit you, make it seem like you're making false accusations, or that you were a willing participant. But with the recording we just made, it'll be hard for them to deny what their client was doing. I nodded, trying to process everything. And Ethan? What happens to him?
That's separate charges, assault and battery. He'll have his own trial.
You'll need to testify there too?
If you're willing.
I'm willing.
Detective Morrison squeezed my shoulder gently. You should be proud of yourself, Olivia. What you did today was brave.
You may have just saved other women from going through what you went through. After giving my final statement at the police station and getting the wire removed, I returned to Dorothy's house. She made me soup and let me sit in her living room while I decompressed, processing everything that had happened. How do you feel? She asked, settling into the armchair across from me. Numb, I admitted, like it's not quite real yet. That's normal. You've been living in crisis mode for months. Now that the immediate danger is gone, your body and mind need time to adjust. I keep thinking about the other women. The ones who didn't report him. Who just endured it because they felt like they had no choice.
You can't save everyone, dear.
All you can do is save yourself, and hope that your actions make it easier for others to save themselves too. I stayed with Dorothy for 3 more days while everything with the case was processed, and while I figured out what to do next. On the 4th day, I returned to my apartment, half expecting to find it destroyed or Julian waiting inside. But it was exactly as I'd left it, small, shabby, and safe.
I called my stepfather, Michael, for the first time in months. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice gruff and tired.
Olivia, everything okay? Not really, I said. And then I told him everything: the loan, Ethan's betrayal, Julian's coercion, the arrest. All of it. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end.
Jesus Christ,
Michael finally said.
Jesus Christ, Olivia, why didn't you tell me any of this was happening?
You're never around, I said quietly. And I didn't think you'd care. Not care?
You're my daughter. Stepdaughter.
Daughter, he repeated firmly. Your mother married me, which made you mine. Maybe I haven't been great at showing it, but I do care about you. And if I'd known Ethan was pulling this shit, I would have killed him myself. The vehemence in his voice surprised me. In all the years I'd known Michael, I'd never heard him sound so emotional.
I didn't know what to do, I whispered.
I felt so alone. You're not alone. You hear me? You're not alone.
I'm coming home. I'm going to finish this delivery and then I'm coming straight back. And we're going to figure this out together.
Michael's presence in my life changed everything in ways I hadn't expected. He moved back into town permanently, taking a local delivery job that paid less but kept him home every night. He helped me hire a lawyer, a sharp woman in her 50s named Margaret Chun, who specialized in consumer protection and contract law.
Margaret took one look at my loan documents and shook her head.
This is textbook predatory lending, she said during our first meeting. The interest rate alone violates state usury laws. And if we can prove Reeves entered into this agreement with the intent to coerce you into illegal activities, the entire contract becomes void. Can you prove that? I asked. With the evidence the police gathered? Absolutely.
Plus, the other victims have similar loan structures with identical terms. It shows a pattern of behavior.
Reeves wasn't running a legitimate lending business, he was running a recruitment operation for sex. Trafficking. The words still made me flinch. Sex trafficking. That's what had almost happened to me. What had happened to other women who had been as lucky or as stubborn as I'd been. Over the next few weeks, Margaret worked with the prosecutor's office to build the case against Julian. I met the other 3 victims, Sarah, Michelle, and Jennifer, women in their 20s and 30s who'd all fallen into Julian's trap through different circumstances. Sarah had needed money for her mother's medical bills.
Michelle had been trying to escape an abusive ex. Jennifer had been a single mother struggling with childcare costs. We were all different, but the story was the same. Desperation, manipulation, and a contract designed to trap us. He told me it was just escorting, Sarah said during one of our meetings at the prosecutor's office. She was 26, with kind eyes and nervous hands that never stopped moving.
That I'd just be arm candy at business dinners.
But the first client he sent me to made it very clear what he expected. When I refused, Julian threatened to sue me for breach of contract and have me arrested for fraud.
What did you do?
I asked. I went through with it. Her voice dropped to a whisper.
Twice. I couldn't afford a lawsuit, couldn't afford to be arrested. I have a record already shoplifting when I was 18. I thought if I just did what they wanted it would be over. But it never ends.
They always want more. Michelle had been through 7 engagements before she finally went to the police. Jennifer had been in Julian's system for almost a year, servicing clients weekly to pay off a debt that never seemed to decrease no matter how much she earned.
He'd add fees, Jennifer explained.
Administrative costs, transportation expenses, clothing requirements. He said his clients expected a certain standard, so I needed to buy expensive dresses and shoes.
But he controlled where I shopped, and the prices were inflated. Every time I thought I was getting close to paying off the debt, he'd add more charges. Hearing their stories made me simultaneously grateful and furious.
Grateful that I'd refused, that I'd pressed charges, that I'd recorded Julian admitting everything.
But furious that he'd hurt so many women, that he constructed such an elaborate system of exploitation, and that he'd almost gotten away with it.
The preliminary hearing happened 6 weeks after Julian's arrest. I sat in the courtroom between Michael and Margaret, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. Julian entered in an orange jumpsuit, his hair no longer perfect, his expensive suit replaced with prison garb. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than he'd seemed in the coffee shop. His lawyer was exactly what I'd expected, a slick man in an even slicker suit who argued that his client was a legitimate businessman being persecuted by vindictive women who misunderstood the nature of their business arrangements. My client operates a completely legal lending service, the lawyer said smoothly. These women took out loans of their own volition and signed legally binding contracts. If they now regret their decisions, that's unfortunate, but it doesn't constitute a crime. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Amanda Rodriguez, wasn't having it. Your client systematically targeted vulnerable women, provided them with predatory loans at illegal interest rates, and then coerced them into prostitution when they couldn't pay, she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom. We have recorded evidence of Mr. Reeves explicitly offering to forgive debt in exchange for sexual services. We have testimony from multiple victims describing identical patterns of behavior. And we have documentation showing that your client's legitimate lending service operates exclusively as a front for sex trafficking. She played the recording from the coffee shop. My voice, nervous and shaking, asking Julian to clarify his offer. His voice, smooth and confident, explaining exactly what he expected. The words intimate arrangements and personal services and $30,000 for a weekend companion who was willing to be adventurous echoed through the courtroom. When it finished, the judge looked at Julian with undisguised disgust. Mr. Reeves, you are hereby ordered to stand trial on charges of sex trafficking, coercion, operating an illegal prostitution ring, and violation of state usury laws. Bail is denied. You will remain in custody until trial. Julian's face went pale. His lawyer immediately began objecting, arguing that his client was a flight risk and that the evidence was circumstantial. But the judge wasn't interested. Circumstantial? She raised an eyebrow.
We have a recording of your client soliciting prostitution. That's not circumstantial. That's damning. Request denied. As they led Julian out of the courtroom, he turned and looked directly at me. Not with rage this time, but with something that looked almost like resignation. He knew he was finished. I felt Michael's hand on my shoulder, steady and reassuring.
You did good, kid, he said quietly. You did real good.
Ethan's trial happened 2 weeks later.
It was simpler, more straightforward. He'd assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses.
There was video footage from the medical office security cameras. Dorothy testified, describing exactly what she'd seen.
The receptionist testified. Even the elderly man who'd been in the waiting room came forward to give his account.
Ethan's lawyer tried to argue that it had been a family dispute that got out of hand, that Ethan had been under stress and hadn't meant to hurt me.
But when the prosecution showed photos of my bruised face and ribs, when Dr. Patterson testified about my post-surgical condition and how dangerous the assault could have been,
the jury wasn't sympathetic. I had to testify. Had to sit in the witness box and describe what had happened, what had led up to that moment. I told them about the loan, about Ethan's disappearance, about his attempt to coerce me into prostitution to pay off his debt.
And when you refused, the prosecutor asked, what did your stepbrother do? He hit me, I said clearly. He slapped me hard enough to knock me out of my chair. I fell and hit my ribs on the floor.
I'd had surgery 3 days before. The pain was ... I paused, remembering. I thought he'd torn my stitches. I thought I was bleeding internally again. And after he hit you, what did he say?
He said, you think you're too good for it? He was angry that I wouldn't agree to sleep with Julian's clients. The courtroom was completely silent. I looked at Ethan, sitting at the defense table. He wouldn't meet my eyes.
The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours.
Guilty on all counts, assault and battery, assault of a vulnerable person, reckless endangerment. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. It wasn't enough, not really. Not for what he'd done to me, what he'd tried to make me do. But it was something. After the sentencing, Michael and I walked out of the courthouse together. It was a bright afternoon, unseasonably warm for late autumn. The sun felt good on my face. How are you feeling? Michael asked.
Tired, I admitted. Relieved, angry still, but also
lighter, like I can finally breathe.
That's good.
That's real good. We walked to his truck in silence. Before he started the engine, he turned to me. I need to apologize to you, Olivia. For what?
For not being there. After your mom died, I shut down.
I couldn't handle the grief. Couldn't handle raising a daughter on my own. So I ran. I took long-haul routes, stayed away as much as possible.
And I left you alone with Ethan, thinking he'd look after you. I trusted him. His voice cracked.
I should have been there. Should have protected you.
You didn't know what he was, I said softly. Neither did I, but I should have.
I'm your father. Stepfather. Father, he repeated again, more firmly. I married your mom, which means I made promises.
To her and to you. I broke those promises. I'm sorry, Olivia. I'm so damn sorry. I reached over and took his hand.
It was weathered and calloused. The hand of someone who worked hard for a living. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. Margaret successfully petitioned to have my loan declared void. The court ruled that Reeves had entered into the contract with illegal intent and that the interest rate violated state usury laws. My debt was erased completely, not just to Julian, but to the hospital as well. Since Margaret argued that my emergency surgery had been the direct result of stress caused by Julian's harassment. You're clean, she told me with a smile during our final meeting. Completely debt-free.
You can start over. Starting over was harder than I'd expected.
The physical wounds healed. The bruises faded, the stitches dissolved. The surgical site became just another scar. But the emotional wounds took longer.
I had nightmares about Julian showing up at my apartment. About Ethan hitting me again and again and again. About signing loan documents that multiplied every time I looked at them, the debt growing faster than I could pay it.
Michael suggested therapy. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to be one of those people who needed professional help to function. But after the third week of barely sleeping, of jumping at every unexpected sound, I agreed to try. Dr. Sarah Kim was a trauma specialist who worked with victims of coercion and abuse. She was patient and kind, never pushing me to talk about things before I was ready. Slowly, over months of weekly sessions, I began to process what had happened to me. You experienced multiple betrayals from someone you trusted deeply, Dr. Kim explained during one session.
That kind of trauma doesn't heal overnight, but it does heal, Olivia.
You're already doing the work. I returned to nursing school in January, 5 months after everything had fallen apart.
My professors had been understanding about my absences, especially after I explained vaguely that I'd been dealing with a family emergency and legal issues. They allowed me to make up missed assignments and retake exams I'd failed.
It was hard at first. My concentration was shot, and I kept getting distracted during lectures, my mind wandering to courtrooms and police stations and recording devices taped to my chest. But gradually, as the weeks passed and the trials concluded and Julian and Ethan both went to prison, I found my focus returning. I remembered why I'd wanted to become a nurse in the first place. To help people. To be the kind of medical professional my mother had needed but never found. To make a difference, even a small one. By spring semester, I was back on track. My grades improved. I started picking up shifts at the hospital again, working with patients who reminded me that there was still goodness in the world, still people who needed help, still reasons to keep pushing forward. And slowly, carefully, I started to rebuild my life. Michael and I had dinner together every Sunday. Sometimes we talked about serious things. The trials, my therapy, his own guilt about not being there sooner. Other times we just watched football and ate pizza, existing comfortably in each other's presence. Dorothy became like a surrogate grandmother. She called to check on me, invite me over for tea, send me care packages with homemade cookies and encouraging notes. She introduced me to her daughter Emily, the lawyer who specialized in family law. Emily and I became friends, bonding over our shared experiences with the legal system and our determination to help other women. Sarah, Michelle, and Jennifer, the other survivors of Julian's operation, formed a support group. We met monthly, sharing our experiences and our healing processes. It helped to be around people who understood, who didn't need explanations or justifications. I'm thinking about going public with my story, Sarah said during one meeting. Not my name, but the details. There are other women out there who are trapped in situations like we were. Maybe if they hear what happened to us, how we got out, it'll give them hope. We worked with a journalist from the local newspaper to write a series of articles about predatory lending and sex trafficking. The articles didn't name us, but they detailed our experiences, the tactics Julian had used, and the resources available for women in similar situations. The response was overwhelming. The newspaper received dozens of calls and emails from women describing nearly identical experiences with different predators in different cities. It became clear that Julian wasn't an isolated case. He was part of a larger pattern of exploitation that targeted vulnerable women across the country. The articles caught the attention of state legislators who introduced new bills to strengthen protections against predatory lending and increase penalties for coercion and trafficking. I was invited to testify before the state Senate, sharing my story with lawmakers who had the power to change things. Standing in that chamber, looking at rows of senators, I felt the same fear I'd felt in the coffee shop with Julian. But I also felt something else: purpose. My name is Olivia Pierce, I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite my racing heart. And I'm here to tell you about the price of silence. I told them everything. The manipulation, the debt, the coercion, the assault, the arrests, the trials, and the aftermath, the healing, the rebuilding, the determination to make sure no other woman had to go through what I'd gone through. When I finished, the chamber erupted in applause. Several senators approached me afterward, shaking my hand, thanking me for my bravery.
promising to fight for stronger protections. The bills passed 6 months later. They weren't perfect, laws never are, but they were a start. Interest rate caps.
Mandatory disclosures. Harsher penalties for lenders who engaged in coercive practices. Resources for victims. It was progress.
I graduated from nursing school 2 years after the trials ended. Michael sat in the audience at the ceremony, beaming with pride. Dorothy was there too, along with Emily, Sarah, Michelle,
and Jennifer.
Dr. Kim even came, sitting in the back row with a small bouquet of flowers. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The desperation, the betrayal, the fear, the pain.
But also the strength I'd discovered in myself. The people who'd helped me. The changes I'd helped create. I'd started this journey wanting to help women like my mother. Women who'd been ignored and dismissed by the medical system. Now I understood that helping women meant more than just providing medical care. It meant advocating for them, believing them, supporting them when systems failed them. My first job was at a women's health clinic that served low-income patients. It wasn't glamorous, and it didn't pay much, but it was exactly where I wanted to be. I worked with women who reminded me of myself, struggling, scared, doing their best to survive in a world that often seemed designed to break them. I listened when they talked about their problems, their fears, their debts. I connected them with resources, lawyers like Margaret, therapists like Dr. Kim, support groups like the one I'd formed with the other survivors. I made sure they knew they weren't alone. One afternoon, about 6 months into my new job, a young woman came into the clinic. She was 23, visibly nervous, and when I asked what brought her in, she burst into tears. "I'm in trouble," she whispered. "Financial trouble. I took out a loan from this man, and now he's saying I have to... He wants me to ... double quotes." She couldn't finish the sentence. My blood ran cold. "What's the man's name?" "Julian Reeves." I froze. "Julian Reeves is in prison." "He's been in prison for 2 years. "No, not him, his brother.
Marcus Reeves. He's running the same kind of business.
Same terms, same threats. He said his brother made some mistakes, but he's learned from them. He knows how to be more careful." The familiar rage ignited in my chest. Another Reeves. Another predator. How many more were out there?
But this time I knew exactly what to do.
"You're going to be okay," I told her, taking her hand. "I've been where you are. And I'm going to help you." I called Detective Morrison, who'd been promoted to lieutenant. I called Margaret Chen. I called the support group. Within hours, we had a plan. The fight wasn't over. It would probably never be completely over.
There would always be men like Julian and Marcus Reeves, looking for vulnerable women to exploit.
But now there were also women like me, like Sarah and Michelle and Jennifer, who knew what to look for and how to fight back.
As I sat with that young woman explaining her options,
connecting her with resources,
I realized something important. I'd survived. Not just physically, but in every way that mattered.
I'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to me and transformed it into purpose. Ethan had tried to destroy me. Julian had tried to break me. But they'd failed. I was still here. Still fighting. Still helping. And I wasn't finished yet.